everyone. Welcome back to the Biblical Monologue podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Flanagan, and the Biblical Monologue is where you hear stories of from moms who've encountered God through motherhood. And today I have with me Gladys Childs. Gladys is an author, speaker, religion professor, pastor's wife, and mom, helping others to be free to thrive for the abundant life God has for them. She serves as chaplain at Texas Wesleyan University and is the women's director at LifePoint Fellowship. Gladys brings 25 years of experience and knowledge to her ministry. Gladys is frequently called authentic, witty, and candid as she shares her journey through life's ups and downs. Her passion is meeting people at the intersection of faith and life's difficulties. No stranger to heartache herself, she grew up in a non church going family with an alcoholic mother and is a trauma survivor. Gladys is married to a pastor and they have one son, Scott, who is 16. Welcome, Gladys.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I am so glad that you're here, and I am really looking forward to hearing from you today. And I think our guests will be as well. So you have quite an extensive background, it looks like. Being in women's, but you have also written a book called Busting Barriers. So tell us just a little bit about your book, and also I will be sure to put the links to purchase your book or for anyone who wants to find out more in the description box. But just tell us a little bit about your book and what led you to write that.
Well, my book, Busting Barriers, is about overcoming emptiness and unleashing a fruit filled life. And I was inspired to do it. I just felt God laying on my heart that I needed to write a devotional on the fruits of the Spirit. And I basically replied to God, there are a million books on the fruit of the Spirit. Why do I need to write another one? And I just felt like God kept impressing that on me. And so I just prayed about it a lot and did a lot of research. And so my book focuses on the nine fruits of the Spirit, but I take those and I look at the psychological barriers, the top five most common psychological problems people have regarding love or joy or peace or patience. And
Wow.
then I deal with how you can overcome that, but from a biblical point of view. And then I have personal affirmations and action that they can put into place. So it's a 40-day devotional, and there are five devotionals for each fruit of the Spirit.
That is definitely a different perspective on the fruit of the Spirit. So it sounds like an incredible devotional. And it's just like with the fruit of the Spirit, you always think it's just, that should be just so easy to do when you read that in Galatians. And you think, well, just need to have more self control or I need to have this. But addressing those barriers that it gives people practical steps to
Mm-hmm.
overcome those things through Christ's help, of course, and then actually walk those out. So that sounds really good and very relevant. And I'm so glad that you wrote that book. And I will be sure to link it again in the description so that everyone can go and check it out. So thank you for sharing that. And I guess we'll get right to it. Gladys is here today to share how she's encountered God through motherhood, and I'm just really excited to hear what you have to say. We did mention that you have a 16-year-old son, so this
Mm-hmm.
is going to be so applicable to me as well, as I have twin 15-year-olds right
Mm-hmm.
now. So let's go ahead and get to it.
Well, as you mentioned in my bio, I grew up in a household that we didn't go to church, and my mom was an alcoholic. And not only was she an alcoholic, but she was a really mean drunk.
Mm.
So I never knew when I was coming home from school in elementary what I would walk into, whether one, she would even be there, or if I'd be locked out of the house until she came home, or if she'd just be in a raging drunk mood, or if she'd be going after my father. So I just never knew what to experience. And I just had a very difficult time. Um, And so you couple that with other issues and other things that had happened in my life. And then you fast forward to motherhood. And
Right.
then it's like all the voices that I have from my past, from my mom and my dad, um, I didn't want to repeat those.
Yeah.
Um, Not that drinking is a problem for me because it's not, but it's still her actions and her words and how she treated me in her drunken rage fits that I didn't ever want those to come out for my son. And so I think one of the things that God taught me the most is that we have a choice no matter what our backgrounds. And I think it's whether we've experienced trauma or even if we've come from a great background where our parents love us, we still have to make a choice that either A, we're not going to treat our children the way we were treated wrongly, or if you grew up in a good home, you're going to choose to continue the good habits and you're going to pass those on to your kids. So I think it's both because I've met some people who had wonderful childhoods and then they just kind of lose it as
Yeah.
adults in the way they treat their kids. So I think it's both. So God has really worked with me like I have a choice.
Hmm.
And I've learned that I need to pause between stimulus and response. So I'll give an example. And then if you have questions, I'll stop for a bit. So my son, I think he was 2 or 3, and he was just very difficult as a little boy. He was a sweet child and thoughtful, but as my mother-in-law said, he was not easy. And he was not easy. And he would just fight me on getting ready. And we were always beyond late to church and because he wouldn't be helpful. And finally, one day, I just really lost it. And if it had been my mother looking at me and I had done that, she just would have yelled at me, screamed at me, and spanked me and hit me. That's what would have been the response, yelling and hitting.
Hmm.
But with my son, I was really angry. And I just looked at him and I realized that this is a moment and I had a choice that I could choose a different path or I could treat him like my mom would have treated me. And I just remember looking at him. He was in the hallway and I said, Scott, I am really angry right now. I am so angry. I'm going to go to my room and I'm going to calm down. But when I come out, I expect you to be fully dressed and ready to go because I've had it. And so I really talked from, I wasn't screaming or yelling at him, but I just let him know that I have reached my limit, but I'm going to go calm down. So I went to my room and freaked out on my own in private.
Yes.
um, and then once I calmed down enough, I came back and I just remember this and he was standing up so straight like a soldier just standing straight and his hands were
Oh,
by his sides. He was fully dressed, ready to go, and he just looked at me and he said, "Mommy, how much is this going to hurt?" And I thought to myself, I just started laughing. I thought, you have never been spanked. You've never had anything happen to you. But obviously, I must have scared you. Um, but that impression with me, just I remember, wow, that could have been so different if I didn't have faith in God and if I didn't listen to that still small voice telling me, hey, stop. In
yes.
this moment, you have a choice, and what are you going to choose?
Yeah. That, I love that you said we have a choice because there's such a victim mentality now, just
Mhm.
in general. And, people just blame their behavior a lot of times on the way they were treated, but we really do have a choice. And as hard as that can be, especially given your background, it's really refreshing to hear you say that and to remind me of that as a mom and also our listeners. And as I was thinking about your testimony, just talking about how you grew up with a mom who was an alcoholic, how did you come to know the Lord out of that?
Well, when I was 14, my dad retired from his job. I was a late in life child. He was 51 when I was
Hmm.
born. I was an accident, and so when I was 14, he retired, and we moved to a new city and to a new state. And that first week, the local youth director came by with one of the youth group um, kids and invited me to go to church. I wasn't at home, but they spoke to my mom. And for whatever
Hmm.
reason, my mom told me, which is surprising because she
Oh,
at that time hated church and anything to do with it. But she told me, and this my thought, this is honestly what I thought. I thought, well, I have nothing better to do and I don't know anybody, so I might as well go. So I went, and it was nice, and I would just go to like the youth group stuff. And then they eventually invited me to church and I went. And then that same summer they invited me to go to camp. And again I thought, I have nothing better to do, so I might as well go.
Yeah.
So I went, and literally that first night there was a true hellfire and brimstone pastor.
Wow.
Like the epitome of that. And he literally scared me to death. Just it frightened me so much to the
Mhm.
point I couldn't sleep. I was completely freaked out, which would make sense based on my background.
Yeah.
And because children of alcoholics feel a lot of guilt. So you have somebody talking about how sinful, how evil you are, and that just, that didn't help anything, except for the fact that it drove me to accept Christ.
Mhm.
And so that night, I remember I woke up the pastor's wife who was in our cabin. And I said, I'm so afraid I can't sleep. Can I crawl into bed with you? Which would never happen now, but this was back in the 80s. And she was like, okay, sure. And she literally just let me sleep by her all night long because she knew I was so afraid.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Thank
even
goodness for
though,
her, right?
yeah, yeah. And she just let me stay. And even though I would not recommend that method to reach people for Christ, it
Yeah.
can work, and it did work for me, and
Yeah.
that's how I came to know Christ.
That is it's like I was thinking as you were sharing that, like God was pursuing you,
Hmm.
like just the fact that your mom even told you about it and she didn't
Yeah.
like church at all. And you were like, well, why not? It's just those things like that that we just kind of think, oh, whatever. But it's really like the Holy Spirit just,
Hmm.
pulling you to him and the way he was pursuing you and you started going to youth group and then went got invited to church and then I know what you mean about that message, the hellfire and brimstone. But it's just that's such a testimony that, to anyone who may be out there who
Hmm.
has lived through what you have or has, is maybe even going through that now where they're living with someone who's an alcoholic and they're dealing with that guilt and those kind of things like um you know that's just such an encouragement and a comfort that the Lord does pursue us and that all they have to do is say yes to him. um Thank you for sharing that. That is a
You're
really
welcome.
an awesome, awesome way story that you shared.
Well,
I
the
had
one
one.
thing. Oh,
I
can
had
I?
one.
Is it
Go
okay
ahead.
if I add one thing?
Of course.
I was just thinking about the guilt in case anybody has experienced the with the alcoholism.
Yes.
That the great thing about Christ is He does pursue us, and I wasn't responsible for my mom and her alcoholism.
Yeah.
I wasn't responsible for her actions.
Hmm.
So the things I have done wrong in my life, I am responsible for those. But the great thing through Christ, we ask for forgiveness and they're gone. And I don't believe in guilt. I don't believe in harboring guilt or hanging on to guilt. And I don't anymore. Where I used to. It took me a while to get to that point where I could let it go. But I really believe that when we accept Christ, Christ comes to set us free.
Well, it's funny that you address guilt because I was just going to ask about that, but only more so in your own role as a mother.
Mhm.
Did you have that guilt from your childhood where you had said growing up with an alcoholic you would experience that guilt like when you would go to discipline your son or mom guilt is so rampant anyway. It
Mhm.
can be about anything. Did you go through experience guilt as a mom and did you have to take that to the Lord and go through that process?
Honestly, no. I really haven't
Good.
experienced mom guilt, but I think it goes back to, I think when I first had my son, a lady looked at me and she said, I know you have to work and I know you've got other stuff going on in your life, but you don't ever feel guilty for what you have to do to help provide for your family,
Mm,
or you don't feel guilty. You're going to do your best for your son and you let it go.
that's
And so
amazing.
it really was a blessing. And that always stuck with me.
Mm,
And I think between that and my truthfulness with my son. So
yeah.
when I make a mistake, when he was little, I think the best way for children to learn about forgiveness is when we as adults, when we make mistakes, and we do, that we're just honest and we don't try
Mm,
to cover it up. So if I would make a mistake, I would just tell him and I'd say, I'm so sorry. And like one time, he had a sippy cup and I totally forgot that I didn't put a lid on it because we're working to that stage to where you don't need the lid. But I
yes.
forgot to tell him. I don't know what I forgot, and it was full of milk, totally full. And he just took that thing and he chugged it back, and milk literally went everywhere. And
Whoops.
it was another of those moments where he just looked at me because that had never happened before, and he was wondering, "Am I going to get in trouble?" So he looked at me, and I looked at him, but it was that pause between stimulus and response again.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that went through my mind was to yell because my mom would have yelled at me. But instead, we just stared at each other for a moment and then we just started laughing. And I said, I am so sorry, Scott. That was my fault because I didn't put the lid on and I didn't tell you. And then
Hmm.
he was literally 3. Now
Yeah.
he was very verbal and he said, it was my fault, Mom. I didn't look.
Oh,
And so I said, "No, it really was
wow.
mine." Then I thanked him for thinking the floor needed a drink. That
Yeah.
was very thoughtful, but the floor didn't, but thank you for that. And so we just laughed. And I said, "Well, kid, if you're gonna do something and commit, you always go big or go home. And you fully committed to drinking out of that cup. And so good for you." So that's how that went.
That I think I came up with about 6 questions while you were talking because this has been so good. It's been good for me, but I'm thinking about other moms because I've always been a working mom and I've always had to work.
Mhm.
And I experienced at one point, I guess I would say actually until my boys were um, probably, let's say my twins now are 15 and they're my youngest. And I think until they were about maybe 6 or 7, I I had extreme mom guilt about having to work. Like I just thought that I was the worst mom ever because I had to work outside the home and it was nothing towards my husband. It wasn't his fault. It was all this guilt that I put on myself. So if you were talking to a mom who is feeling guilty for what she has to do to provide for her family, what would you say to her?
I would say that let go of the guilt, um, because we need to provide for our
Mhm.
children and we all don't have a spouse that can pay for everything with their jobs, or we may not even have a spouse to even help
Right.
us. We may be single moms or single dads. And so I think that God just expects us to do our best, and we just need to let some stuff go. It's okay if the house is messy. It's okay. The main thing is, do you love your kids? Do you show them love? Do you show
Yeah.
them forgiveness? Do you ask for forgiveness? When you are at home together and you have time, are you spending time together? Those things are so much more important. If they know they're loved, they're fine. I
Yeah.
really truly believe that. And I also think that God just loves us so much and loves our kids so much that I think we sometimes make up things that aren't really need to be there. Because I think that if we're trying to raise godly kids and all of those things, I think Satan kind of just sneaks in like, oh, wow,
Mhm.
really? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, just imagine if you could do this with your child, or it's like they're okay. They're so resilient and things are fine. And we just need to let it go because all we can do is the best we can do with what we have available at the time. Um, and so to me, I just let it go. let it
Yeah.
go, because your kid just wants to know they're loved
Mhm.
and cared for. And if you're loving on them and hugging them and, there when you can be, then
Mhm.
they're fine. They're fine. And if you're teaching them about God and faith and they're growing and strong in that, they're fine.
That's such great advice to spend the time that you do have with them, showing them that you care. That was something that my mom said to me when my boys were little. And she said, I never wanted to work either. She was a teacher. She said,
Hmm.
but it's just what's important is that you keep doing what you're doing and spend time with them when you're home and don't worry about all those things that need to be done. You can do that when they nap, or you can do that when they go to bed at night. And I was like, oh, like I would come home sometimes and rush around to get dinner and clean up the kitchen and things like that after we had been away from each other all day. And it shifted my perspective to like get them and just be with them for a while. Like eat dinner a little later or, figure it out so that you can have that extra time with them. The laundry can wait, like you said, those household tasks that we think are so important,
Yeah.
they're just not, and they're going to be there regardless. So they're always there. Laundry doesn't ever go away. So, why not wait until they go to bed to throw it in? So
Yeah.
that's such helpful advice. And I, hope and I'm also praying that anyone who's listening will really take that to heart because I can I can say from personal experience that allowing yourself to just succumb to that guilt, it just doesn't do you any good. And it makes you not effective as a mom when you're just wallowing in that guilt all the time instead of just taking what you have and enjoying it and doing the best you can.
Hmm.
That's great. I had one other question. That is about where you were talking about the pausing between the stimulus and response. Like, do you have any practical tips or advice for someone who's struggling with like they know that they are maybe overreacting with to their child or like you know just getting flying off the handle or whatever it is that they're experiencing and they know it and they're struggling with it. Would you have any like practical steps they could follow or tips for them?
Yes, I think there are several things. The first thing is make sure that you're keeping up with your devotionals and your walk with God,
Absolutely.
um, and ask God to help you, um, and ask God to remind you in those moments, like when you're starting to lose it, like, hey, you have a choice. But I think we're only as strong as we are connected to God. And so I think that comes first. If we're doing our best to grow in our relationship with God, everything else seems to work out.
Yeah.
The second thing is just to like count to 10. Just wait.
Yeah.
And I know some people, I had a lady tell me once, but I can't wait. When somebody says something or doesn't, I just want to say something. I said, in your head, I want you just to count 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10 and don't rush it. I said, count to 10 and then respond.
Mhm.
If you can just wait a bit, it helps you gain perspective. And I think the next thing is if you can remember back to your childhood or when you were younger, even if you grew up in a great household, maybe it was a teacher or maybe it was somebody else outside the home who made snap judgments about you or who reacted in such a way so quickly that it broke your heart, maybe even broke your spirit. I know that we all have instances like that. And if we can remember what it was like and remember that we have a choice, um, and that we can choose to do different.
Mhm.
Um, but I think all those things help. Staying connected to God, pausing and counting to 10. And I'd say also, if you need to walk away, just tell your kid, I've got to walk away. I need to
Yes.
calm down. Um, because I think that lets them know it's serious. Because if the situation actually is serious, which it is
Mhm.
sometimes, depending on what they're doing, that gives them a wake up call, but in a good way. And then you can go calm down and then come back.
That walking away You were talking about that with your son, how you had to
Hmm.
go to your bedroom. It When you started talking, I had a memory come back. My oldest son, who's now 19, was in the temper tantrum phase of life, so maybe 18 months old, just a little tiny thing. And boy, did he have some doozies. And I remember one day he had himself a tremendous meltdown in the hallway, and I called my mom, or I was talking to my mom or something. We were on the phone with each other when it happened, and she says, "Now you need to step over him and you need to go to your room and close your door and sit down on your bed until you feel better." And I was like, "What?" Like, I thought she's going to tell me to, make him stop and, make him do whatever. No, she said, "You need to walk away." And it was the best advice. Like, it helped me so much. He wondered what the heck was going on. So that, disrupted his tantrum. And then I was able to cool down and
Hmm.
then we reconvened. But that was something I was able to take into having twins and going forward with him. It really does help you reset when
Hmm.
you can just pause and like you said, I love how you just told your son, even though he was little, "I'm gonna go sit down in my room because I'm too upset right now." Like, that's such a mature way to handle it. Like, as parents, we forget that we are the parents sometimes,
Hmm.
and instead of not telling them what's going on or yelling at them or whatever, like, it's okay to just say, like, "I need a break. Like,
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time with you right now, and I couldn't just remove myself." So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that.
You're welcome.
And those tips, I love that the first one was spending time with the Lord. That's
Mhm.
just so critical, and I hope that people will take that to heart and just really find a devotional or some way to be in the Word every day. That
Mhm.
was such a great that's a great start to everything. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you, right?
Yes.
I will let you share if there's anything else you would like to share. I asked so many questions, so I will I'll let you share.
Well, I think one thing I remember when I was a little kid, I remember understanding things that were going on. I remember the difficulties, and the adults would have conversations. And I remember thinking, I understand what's going on, maybe not at their level or their depth. And so as I grew up and I would talk with people, or I'd go to my friends' houses, like when I was in college and their siblings were really little, and my friends would say, they don't understand what's going on. I'm like, they do. They're humans. And if we
Mhm.
remember that in some ways they are just little people in terms of they know and they understand, it may not be at our level, but they know and understand enough of what's going on. And so if we're just honest with our kids and talk about realities of life, um, not that we need to share all the details because we don't need to burden them with adult things that they're not ready for. But if we're honest, like, I'm upset and I need to walk away, or I made a mistake, can you forgive me? Or, yeah, like if you're talking with your husband or your friend about something that's difficult at work and they overhear it, you can say, yeah, I'm just having this struggle. So here's how I'm trying to work through it. Because they don't need to know all the gory details. But if you
Right.
do those things, they can see you in a healthy way and see how you're coping, how you're dealing with things, and hopefully see good steps that they can implement in their life later on. Um, Instead of like my mom, something happened and she'd fly off the handle and go nuts.
Yeah.
It's so much better if they can see us, I'm upset, I'm going to walk away, or I'm
Mhm.
struggling with this and here are the steps I'm taking.
Have you seen your son like implement any of those strategies himself as he's gotten older, or like some of the things that you introduced when he was younger? Have you seen him actually do those things now that he's a teenager?
Yes, actually, I have.
That's cool.
It really is cool. And just, was it last week? No, it was this week because he's a little behind in his driving, and so he just got his driver's permit recently. I
Oh,
know, right?
congrats.
Thanks. Well, my
Sort of,
husband took the
right?
first week. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Whew.
It's
I'm not
scary.
quite ready for that.
Yeah.
But my husband took the first week. Well, I told him that's really it's his job to teach our son how to drive because I carried him for 9 months, and then I was the one who stayed up all night with him.
Right.
That year because my husband has migraines, so my husband could not wake up in the middle of the
Mm,
night to take care of him because it'd just make him sick. So I took that on, so you get the driving.
right.
Um, but he's out of town this week, so he's my son is driving, but my husband got the first week, so I'm on the second week, and there was one instance we were going somewhere, and he looked at me and said, "Mom, you just need to calm down." And he said it really nice. Like he's like,
Yeah.
"You just calm down, Mom." And I was like, "Yeah, just calm down." I think that's one of the things he's learned is like whatever it is you're going through, that's not the end of your story or that's
Mm,
not the last word. And so it's like, "Hey, we can work through this. There's something, there's a plan, or we can pray. Let's just calm down." And so I do
wow.
see him doing those things and reminding me when I forget. So that's cool.
That's great. And it's you needed his advice because in that situation, as we have one who's driving now and going through that, it is very tempting to just go into mom mode and go, "How can you tell me to calm down? You're gonna hit that person, blah 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 blah," and just go crazy, But I love how you paused and you were like, he's right. I mean, there's really nothing you can do.
There's nothing.
You're literally the passenger. So, I mean, let's be real.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's good to hear you say that we need to listen to our kids too.
Hmm.
Like they have that space to just be honest with us. If we're going to be honest with them and they're honest with us,
Hmm.
then we need to be reminded to like it's okay and we need to listen to them.
We
So that's
do.
good. That's awesome. Does he like driving? I'm just curious.
He does. He does. He was really nervous at first, and that may have been why he went a little slow getting his
Uh-huh.
permit. But he loves it, and he even said, "I'm looking forward to because next year he'll be able to drive by himself." And he was like, "I can take somebody to the prom by myself
Oh,
without y'all."
that's
And I'm
great.
like, "Yeah."
Yeah,
I
that's
figured
cool.
when he was more interested in girls, he would care more about driving.
Yes. Yes. Girls and sports. That
Hmm.
those are the two motivating factors.
Yeah.
So we survived once. He's 19 and he still gets himself around. But with twins, it's going to be a whole different ball game. So they can start this summer because in Ohio at 15 and a half, you can get your permit and start
Hmm.
taking the online like driver's ed and stuff. So they are both so excited to drive. And I'm like, oh my goodness, here we go again. Like, I have a few months to mentally prepare myself for this, but really, it's a dad's thing. Like, my husband is so relaxed with it, and he did so well with our older son, and he would think of things to tell him that didn't even come across my mind because I was just scared, right? So
Yeah.
I need to take some like mental notes from that experience and just be more practical with the other two, but and calm down, like you said. So that uh, everything you shared has been so encouraging, and I would love to have you back to talk about trauma and things like that. If you ever want to come back, I would love to have you come back. Um, but is there anything else that you want to share about your experience in motherhood?
Um, I think one of the last things I would share is, and I would love to come back, but one of the last things I would share is to be present, just to truly be fully present with your children because the days, even though they seem long, especially when they're little bitty ones, when
Yeah.
they're under 5, whew, those days can just seem like an eternity.
Mhm.
But the years really are so short. It goes by so fast. And if you can just set aside other stuff, the laundry can wait. It doesn't matter if the house is a mess. Learn some crock pot recipes so you can throw stuff in and you never have
Yes.
to stand really over a stove again. And just be present with your kid and try to thoroughly enjoy each moment and teach them to enjoy the moment they're living in, because our world teaches us just to rush and to look forward to, oh, especially when you're young, oh, when I turn, in junior high I can do this, or when I'm 15 I can do this, or then I can
Mhm.
drive, or when I'm an adult I can do this, or when I have my own house. And we're always looking to the next thing,
Yeah.
and when we're looking to the next thing we miss out on the beauty and the joy that we have. And even it can be hard when they're little, or maybe hard when your kids are learning how to drive. There's still joy to be found, and happiness and peace. And um, my son's only going to learn to drive once, and then it's
Mhm.
going to be over.
That's so
Um,
true.
and it's just to be present and to let everything else go, um, because they are so precious. Our children are so precious, and they're so worth our time and energy. And if we can do that, I believe that when they're older, that you know, they'll be there.
Mhm.
They'll want to come home. They'll want to be with us. They'll want to interact with us, because it wasn't a one-way street where I'm the parent and I'm dominant and I'm going to tell you how things are going to be, or maybe I'm mistreating you or abusing you. um, it's like, hey, I know you're my parent, but it's like, hey, I can talk and I can be there. I know you're going to be there for me, even if you can't show up to everything, because I can't show up to everything for my son. But he knows that I'm there and in his corner. And when they know that, we just create a safety net for them, and we just set them on a path that's just amazing.
Uh, I love how you said to just be in those moments and not rush them, because even our kids will tell us that. My oldest son had said, I used to think it would be, such a big deal to be able to drive and have a job and all that. And he goes, well, it's really not all it's cracked up to be.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, you're right about that. You're right. Doesn't it make, when you were a teenager and you were home and bored over the summer, it doesn't seem so bad now, does it? And he said, no. He said, those were the days right there, riding my bike to the pool. And, he was going through all these memories that he had. And he said, I don't know why I wanted to rush all that. And I was like, that's such a good point. Even when they say it, and he's so much younger, it's a good, it reminded me, like, don't rush, his brothers through those
Mhm.
same steps. Like, let them have their time and just enjoy every moment. And it is hard to do when they're little. You're right. I know it's
Mhm.
keep them alive and put them to bed, and you made it through another day.
You made it, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of joy in it. And when you look back at the pictures, it's hard to believe that it was that it went so fast.
Yes. Oh,
So that's um, that's such great advice. And even as a teenage mom, I will be holding on to all these moments because we'll blink and they'll graduate. That's how it happens.
I know I have 2 years left,
Yes.
and maybe less, because my son may be going away to school next
Oh.
year.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Yeah. So
yes,
really savor all these moments, right?
yes. So it's he's I know all children are different, but he's extremely gifted, and so we're just struggling with him in school
Mm,
and trying to
yeah.
keep him challenged enough. And so I never thought I'd be in a place where I'd be saying we might be sending him away to school. Uh, and my heart still stops because I'd rather keep him at home. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I just trust God, and God will work out whatever needs to happen with him.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll meet those needs that he
Mhm.
has and,
Yeah.
work out for the best for everybody.
Hmm.
Well, I guess before we finish up today, I have one last question for you, and that is, what is your favorite mom tip or trick?
This one is get everybody in the household involved in the cleanup. Um,
That's
as soon
amazing.
as soon as the kids are able to and carry stuff or do stuff, get them involved and teach them. One, because it just helps because they're making part of the mess.
Yeah,
But two, it teaches them life skills. Because as a college professor and a chaplain, I meet so many students, they can't wash their clothes, they cannot cook basic things like a grilled cheese,
right.
or they can't do anything by themselves. And so get them involved and let them do what they can do. And they can do way more than you think. If you've got a little one, they can handle way more. But let them be involved. And if you just spend like 5 minutes a day, say, hey, everybody, it's 5 minute cleanup, and everybody go and do what they can do. One, you won't be living such a trash heap. It helps.
It
But it's
does.
teaching them skills.
Hmm.
And like my son, he knows how to wash clothes and
Hmm.
load the dishwasher, and he's learning how to do different meals, and so it just helps.
It, it's amazing how much it helps when everyone chips in because it doesn't put
Hmm.
it all on you or your spouse. We, a couple years ago, we got our boys all their own laundry baskets
Hmm.
because we got tired of hearing his socks were in my stuff and this is his shirt and that and blah blah. And we were like, wait a second, why are we doing your laundry? You're perfectly capable human beings. Here you go. And we got them each a little laundry hamper and we said, we'll take care of the towels. You're responsible for all your own laundry. And it's been a wonderful, because if they don't have clothes, guess whose fault it is?
Hmm.
Their fault. Because they didn't plan out getting that done. And we have jobs around the house that their day rotates with what things they are supposed to do. But I love how you talked about getting them even in the kitchen as they get older.
Hmm.
Um, that I can speak from personal experience on that. I was at a loss when I first got married because my mom did everything. Like I would help make the salad or, one of those quick rice things. I could do things
Hmm.
like that. I could make a grilled cheese, just some very, very basic things. But beyond that, I was at a loss and it took me, there was a learning curve when I first got married. So we're trying to teach our boys a little bit more in the kitchen as they're older because I don't want them to, if they live on their own, I want them to be able to plan out a week's worth of meals, go get their food and think, cook.
Hmm.
So just some of those skills. That's great advice. I love that. And I love that you talked about getting the whole family involved because they take ownership of it if it's out all of ours. That's great. Was there anything else you would like to share today before we finish up our time?
Just all the moms who are listening, just, enjoy this time, and no mom guilt allowed. No mom guilt allowed.
Love that. Well, thank you so much, Gladys, for joining us today. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.